So here we go. Let's talk T1D and travel. It's probably one of my favorite things. And there's really no place we can't travel with type 1. And it's all about preparation. So whether you go by plane, car, boat, bike, foot, whichever hot air balloon, doesn't matter. Planning and preparation is the key. So I always say to people, you always want to consider the what ifs. So some things to consider is, what will I do if I lose my hand luggage with all my diabetes supplies? What's my backup plan if my pump stops working? What will I do if I get food poisoning and start vomiting? And what happens if I go through customs and I've left my travel letter on the bed in the hotel? So they're just some of the things that are good to have swirling around your head as you're preparing to travel, because these all help us be able to pack and prepare the best way to be able to do anything on the trip. Now, a few years ago, I was working with some people that were traveling around Europe for 6 months, and there was much discussion when I said, I want you to pack double what you will need for the trip. Unfortunately, would you believe, one of their bags got stolen in Rome, and they were left with one other bag. But thankfully, they had listened to me, and they were then able to split for the remainder. So these things really do help us make sure that diabetes comes second and we come first. So where diabetes is living with us, not us living with diabetes. And I think that's the key. And my PowerPoint's not moving there, so I'll try something else. So did I just skip 2 slides?
No,
I just did it. Cool. So one of the first things is to visit your team. So your endocrinologist, your diabetes educator, you may have a full team in a multidisciplinary clinic. And one of the first things we say is really, really important is to get a travel letter. Now, some people say, oh, I never travel with one, or oh, I've never been asked for it. Do you know what? It doesn't matter. If you have a travel letter, you're prepared at any stage. So the travel letter needs to include all medical conditions. So if you've got type 1, asthma, whatever you have, it needs to be documented. It also needs to include all the medications, including for other conditions as well. So insulins, you need it named, your Novorapid, your Opticillin, if you're on Ventolin, Flixitide, all the things. You definitely want them all labelled. Now, depending on what country you go to is actually going to mean more stringent they will be. So going to Indonesia, for example, they actually on their travel letter want every single medication listed with the quantity you're going to take. So it's always good to have a look at the consulates as well, their travel guidance. Devices you use for blood glucose testing and delivering insulin. So make sure if you're using a pump, it's mentioned in the letter. If you're using insulin pens, have it in the letter. Syringes, CGMs, all of those things are really important. And it's also really important that your letter states the importance of carrying your medication and equipment with you at all times. And that it outlines that no matter what circumstance, that your insulin pump and CGM must stay on your body. So that's really, really important. And that's what needs to be included in the travel letter. Also, you wanted to state about hypo treatment, that you're going to carry that with you at all times as well, including glucose tablets, juice, lollies, carbohydrate snacks. Just be very mindful that if you're traveling to US and they have a 30 ml limit, that as long as it's written in your travel letter and they say you need to take a pop top, then you'll be allowed to take it on. But if you don't have that stipulated, they won't allow you to travel with it. A good tip is when you hop on the plane is ask for a little can of lemonade or juice that you can keep at your seat anyway. So it's great to get a new prescription from your doctor as well, with glucagon, anti-nausea medication, especially if you're going on a cruise. So if you're going to go on a cruise, I would definitely highly recommend you chat to your team about getting some anti-nausea medication, because it's really expensive if you have to get it on a boat. Mel, anything you want to add so far?
I was just going to say, I think it's interesting. And we have to, because often we just will consider just the diabetes medications and things. So I think it's a really good point to make sure that we have those other bits that make us feel better. Sorry, my dog's going nuts behind me. Make us feel better if if you've got that, the anti-nausea medication and the, I can't think of what it's called, the Adanthotran, that sort of information, if you start, the medication, if you start vomiting or, upset stomach, all those sorts of things, I think are handy to have and consider as well, those things that sometimes help us if we are unwell and type 1 is around as well. So I think that's a good thing.
And the other one is to the Asian countries, you must write down if you're taking Panadol as well. You can get in a lot of trouble for traveling with Panadol if it's not on a travel letter.
I would say that we've had 84% of our people here tonight who voted traveling in the next 6 months. So we've got a very lucky crowd here tonight.
We have. Hey, Mel, the next poll is, sorry, I could have prepared you, but anyway, who's traveling interstate, who's traveling overseas?
All right.
And Mel, can I have a poll about, are we parents, are we adults living with type 1, are we, that kind of stuff, have we traveled?
Right.
Please.
So the next really important thing when you go to your endocrinologist, and these resources, what I've all pulled together today, you can find in some of the great resources and references that Mel's going to send out to you afterwards. That actually stipulates all of these things. But it's really important that you take a sick day plan. Now, if you're an adult that's participating tonight, the ADA has a great sick day plan for adults living with type 1 diabetes on MDI or pumps, okay? Now, you can print that out and take it to your team and they can fill it out for you as well. It is absolutely brilliant. For those of you that have children, your diabetes team will actually have a sick day plan that they can put together for you, or you may already have it. But these are really, really important. And though we tend to not want to use the word as much anymore, COVID is still around. And I know some friends that are over in the US at the moment, and unfortunately they're locked up in accommodation because they've got COVID. So really important that we do travel with a sick day plan, be it COVID or gastro, anything. A sick day plan is a really good thing to have. And ADA, a big plug for them. It is a really fantastic one they have.
And I think it's just important to make sure that we do these things, because often we think, this is, if diabetes has been in your family for a long time, you figure, I know all this stuff, I know what to do. I don't need to have all these plans in place. I've been doing it for a million years. I don't need that. But I think often we'll forget. And often there are lots of situations where you've got extreme stress when you're in a different country and all sorts of places, that having this there available for the people that are with you, or anybody else, or for yourself, just as a reminder, is a good habit. And
absolutely,
in preparation, it's the way to go.
Absolutely. Okay, so what are the things you want to talk about when you go to see your team? Well, one of the things is the impact of different holiday activities. I'm a big Disney buff, so I love going to Disney World and things like that, and it's not uncommon to walk 26,000 steps. But I also love just lying on a beach. And so what I need to do with my insulin when I'm walking around Disney World compared to when I'm just lying on the beach in Hawaii is very, very different. So having a chat to them about insulin adjustments, you may feel super confident that you don't need to. It's always a good thing just to touch base, because they may be able to have something new that they can share with you. Also important to consider different travel zones. And a really big shout out here, when we are traveling, if you're on an insulin pump, you can change your time at your destination. But if you're on Opticillin and MDI, so Nova Rapid, Fias and Opticillin, otherwise known as MDI, then you need to have a bit of a plan to know how that conversion is going to go, so you don't go too long without Opticillin and you don't also overlap as well. And then any questions or concerns that you have about travel. So what I say to everybody that I work with, I say, we're going to do a travel consultation, come along with a list of things, come along with questions that you want to know, and I'll be able to help them. So that's really important for you guys when you go to your team, to take the questions that you have. There's no silly questions. All questions are fantastic. Anything you want to add there, Mel?
Nope, not yet. I think I'll add later. We're all good.
Yeah. Travel insurance. Now, this is a big one. not all policies cover type 1 diabetes. Please pull out your magnifying glasses, whatever it is, and read the fine print. It is so important. You want to read the terms and conditions of the travel policy. You want to make sure that your insurance covers any pre-existing conditions, including type 1. That includes asthma, that includes anaphylaxis. All of those things are known as pre-existing conditions, epilepsy, etc. If you don't disclose those, then in actual fact, if something happens and they can link it to that when you're on your holiday, you may not be covered. If you disclose them, usually you just get a premium, okay? So you have to pay an extra $100 or so. And, you know, that's a small price to pay for being covered. It's also really important that we make sure that our travel insurance covers our destination. So, for example, there's some destinations in the world at the moment that are not covered by travel insurance due to their high risk. And even war conditions will affect sometimes what the travel insurance will cover. It's also really important to make sure that you're covered if you need to seek medical advice from a GP or a hospital. That is really important as well. Also, the activities you're going to do. I'm really lucky. I'm not a big base jumper, hiker, mountaineer. All right. So I'm not you know, the boring one around Disneyland, Hawaii, that type of stuff. So I'm normally fine if I didn't read the fine print on activities. But I know I have a lot of mates that are big into like base jumping, hiking, skiing, all of those really cool high adrenaline diving activities. It's really important your travel insurance will cover those. So check those as well. Now, don't despair if you get knocked back the first time. There'll be other ones that will cover. Some travel insurance actually say that you need to have a HbA1c under 9%. Others don't. So just look around. You also want to check in this day and age that you are covered for COVID. A lot of insurances now do cover this, but please double check because I was looking the other day and there's still some that will not cover.
I was just going to add, I think it's interesting. I think when we traveled, like in my son's first year of diagnosis, and one of the conditions on there was that you had to tick whether you'd been in hospital within the previous 12 months. And that sort of cut us out in that point because he wasn't even 12 months out of diagnosis. So like you're saying, there are other options that you can do and you can keep trying to find the one that works and explain. That was a long time ago now. So I think they've probably changed, but
no, actually, Mel, that is still one today.
Yeah,
I saw that the other day.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, don't be put off by one insurance saying you can't do it. You want to keep going. And when you're looking at insurance, you want to make sure that it will also cover your insulin device. So a really good one for this is pre-COVID, I thought they said that my insulin pump was covered. But when my husband read the fine print, it was covered for $2,000. Not $8,750. So it's really important that you ensure that the whole cost of your pump is covered. If you are taking a loan pump, you're carrying $17,000 worth of pump there, equipment. So make sure that they will cover, you know how much they will cover you for. So the next bit is, what do we need to pack? And documents. Documents are really important. So you want to pack your travel letter. And we know in our travel letter, we want everything we can possibly have listed. Now, if you think that when you're going to your endo or to your GP, that you've got so much that there's not going to be enough time, you can always draft your own travel letter. You can write down exactly what you want them to include, and then you can give it to them or say, would you like me to email these? And then they can include it all for you. There's lots of templates out there, and some of the resources we've actually got listed actually say what you need in your cover letter. So that's really important as well. Give a copy of your travel letter to each of your traveler companions as a backup. Take a photo of the letter and save it on your phone for easy access. And if you're traveling alone, or even if you're in a group, send a copy to your family, and so they have a copy of the travel letter as well. I must admit, I'm a fan of Messenger, because if I actually send my documents from Messenger to my family, then I also have a record on my phone as well. Very cluey with that, Mel.
Sorry, I just saw a comment that someone has no sound. Have they
Oh.
been able to sort that out? Has everybody else got sound?
I was just about to
You were
try
gonna-
troubleshoot that in the comments.
Okay,
for them.
all right, I'll leave that to you, Mel.
That's okay.
Are you all right for me to keep going?
Yep, okay, cool.
Make a document that lists all your emergency contacts, your medical team, medical conditions, current medications, sick day plan, and any allergies. And also leave a copy of this with family back home. So if you ever do lose all your things, all your belongings, that somebody can get those to you. Now, very rarely will it happen, but if it does happen, you want to be prepared. As we've spoken about, we want a sick day plan, and that plan really needs to include things that are going to cover hypoglycemia. So hypoglycemia, if you get food poisoning with lots of gastro and diarrhea, hypoglycemia in relation to fevers, and it's really, really important we cover all of those things. So if you do get hit by like Bali, you're very well prepared. Now, I've got a thing out here, Mel. Let's see who's the first one in. If you're traveling and you start vomiting, what is the first thing you should do? Who's going to answer that first, Mel? Can you tell me?
No one yet.
There's a virtual protocol.
Test ketones, Tonya, first one in.
Good job, Tonya. Excellent. You do. You want to test for ketones. Because the first thing you want to do is rule out that it is not ketoacidosis, or you're likely to get ketoacidosis. You want to rule out there are no ketones, and then you can go, okay, I've got food poisoning, I've got to deal with that. But it is so very important. The first thing we check is ketones, blood ketones, because if we've got ketones, we've got to really step up into our emergency medical management to ensure we don't become unwell, extremely unwell. So when we're packing, it's really important we pack double the amount. So if you're going for 3 weeks, pack 6 weeks supply. If you're going for 6 weeks, pack 12 weeks supply, and divide them amongst your hand luggage. Now, I know there'll be a lot of people out there going, oh, this chick is crackers. There's no way I'm going to put all this stuff into my hand luggage. In actual fact, you'll be very surprised how much waste there is with diabetes supplies. There is so much packaging. So by the time you empty out your boxes, you can buy a little lunch box. Target had these amazing makeup bags that are clear. They are so super cool. They're nice and supportive, so you can put your sensors, infusion sets in there, and they won't get squashed. You can actually get 1 month's supply in a very small bag. So that's really important. You want to keep diabetes supplies with you at all times. Never put diabetes supplies with your checked luggage, as temperature in the cargo area is really unstable, and you don't want insulin and things frozen. And I was saying to Mel before that a few years back, I don't know if anyone remembers, I think it's about 8 years ago, Qantas had a sudden, it wasn't a strike, I don't know what they actually called it, but they had this part where, we'll say strike, that they called it, and everybody had to get off the plane. They weren't allowed to access their hand luggage, their luggage in cargo. Yep. So all they had with them is their hand luggage. All right. If you've got your supplies such as infusion sets, etc., underneath and not with you on the hand luggage, potentially there's going to be trouble. Now, there's also this out there, sometimes you hear, oh, you're allowed to take an extra medical bag. Look, from all the research I've done, necessarily I would want to say to you, yes, you can have a medical bag. I would definitely not say that, because it would be terrible if they say, no, you're over your 7 kilos, you can't take that. But what I would say is, if you have your travel letter and you've got extra, you're maybe a kilo or so over, and you say, look, these are my medications, I've got a travel letter, then the airlines say they're quite lenient and will definitely take that into consideration. And I made a few phone calls and asked them that as well. So what are some of the things we want to pack? Well, we want to pack our rapid-acting insulin or short-acting insulin. We want to pack such as Fias Nova Rapid or Fias Ultra Fast-Acting, Nova Rapid, Humalog, Fias, all of those medications. We also want to talk about our long-acting insulin, and that might be Opticelin, it might be Levemir, it might be Tiago, there could be Ryzodeg. No matter what it is, you want to pack that. And remember, double of everything. If you're using disposable pens, fabulous. But if you're using insulin pens that are not disposable, make sure you got backup of those because they could break down. Your insulin pump equipment. So you need to take double infusion sets, inserters, cartridges, reservoirs, your backup plan for multiple daily injections if your pump fails. So they're the things also that when you meet with your doctor that you want to discuss. So you want to have a backup plan if you're on an insulin pump that you can refer to if your pump breaks down. Now, sorry, Mel.
If you're on a pump, and so we're obviously when you're on a pump and you're wanting to take backup plan, as in some long-acting and short-acting insulin.
Yeah.
We're not going to take enough short-acting and long-acting insulin for the whole holiday, the whole trip. Would you be taking
you are.
the same of each?
Yep, absolutely. See, the really cool thing is that if you're on a pump, the insulin that you use in your pump is the insulin pump that you would use to give it injections. And your Opticelin and all those things, that's not a lot. It's maybe a few extra pens in your luggage. Because what happens, Mel, if your pump breaks down on the first day you're away, and then the second day you're away, the humidity affects your second one, you're going to need insulin for that whole trip.
Yep.
Unlikely, but you know what? Better safe than sorry.
I have heard some good stories of pump companies being able to get pumps to where you are too. So I think there's some options in that state as well. But I think if we're talking being prepared, then that's the way to go. Yeah.
Now, actually, I'm going to fill you in with something with that. So I know someone that's in the UK at the moment. They can ring the Australian helpline to have to report their pump, but they cannot send a pump to the UK. Okay, and that's the same with other countries as well. So the pumps cannot be sent to another country. If your family decide that they will get it to you a different way, that's different, but be careful with insurance with that. But the pump companies will not send it overseas. There you go. I know it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Blood glucose meters. I know a lot of us are on CGM these days, but it is so important to take blood glucose meters as well. And when you're taking your blood glucose meter, make sure we'll check for ketones too. And I would highly recommend a minimum of 2, more likely 3, in case you have a one breakdown. You want to make sure if you're taking a meter that you've got test strips as well, a finger pricker and lancets. And that is so very, very important. We also want to pack like ketone strips, alcohol wipes, hypo food, emergency simple carb snacks, so your hypo treatment, glucose tablets, etc. Glucagon, and that's a really big one. For a lot of adults don't have glucagon. So that's something that you can chat to your endocrinologist or your diabetes educator or GP about actually having some education on glucagon. In the pediatric world, that is something we do very regularly and make sure everyone has glucagon. But I do know a lot of adults don't. Mel, can you do me a glucagon poll? Thank you. Who has glucagon? It's really fascinating. Medical ID.
And is it in date?
And is it in date? Absolutely. Medical ID. So that's another one that we often go, nah, I don't need it. Now, if you think of it on the flip side, if something happens and you fall down a flight of stairs in Rome, there's a lot of stairs, I believe. You fall down a flight of stairs and you knock yourself out, unfortunately, you've got nothing to do with diabetes, but you're in a pretty bad shape, that if you have a medical ID on it, when somebody comes to help you, the medical care you get will be suited to what you need. And it'd be important that they monitor your glucose levels. Medical ID, it can be as much as a necklace, it can be a bracelet, it can be even medical ID on your phone. I do actually highly recommend that you wear it on person though, because if your phone is like mine in the bottom of a handbag, it may be difficult for people to find. But there's lots of different ways. And even some people have tattoos with type 1 diabetes. And I always have a bit of a joke with my young people that have that. And I say, what happens one day if there's a cure? And then they go, had type 1 diabetes. I kind of like that too. That'd be a badge of honor. You also want to make sure you have spare batteries for your glucose meter and your insulin pump as well. So lots to pack, but don't worry, it's all okay. There are checklists that we're going to send you out that you can tick them off. And I know I have a checklist, and the night before we go, or a couple of days before we go, we check it all off. I have one that I actually do the reverse coming back to Australia. And when I get back to Australia, I pack one in my case, ready for my next trip. Which is going to be, I think it was 3.5 years between my last trips with COVID. So it's also important when we're considering what we're going to pack, our continuous glucose monitoring equipment. You need to make sure you take a transmitter. Take a spare transmitter, because we do know technology is only as good as the one that's currently working. And we do know they can break down. If you have got a receiver, make sure you take the receiver, the charger. You want to make sure you have enough sensors. I always say to people, pack enough sensors plus 10% in case that you do have one that doesn't work. If you need an insertion device for your sensor, ensure that you pack it. And also adhesive tapes. One of my favorite things is going on to like Rockedex and choosing the most flamboyant stickers to go on my CGMs while I'm traveling, so I look super cool. Frio packs or other storage things to keep insulin cool. Another one is MedAngel or similar devices that can actually track the temperature on your device. It's also important to have at least 2 universal power plugs in case one fails. USB charging cables. Now, put these in your hand luggage, guys. Most planes now have a USB port, so you can charge everything while you're flying. And also paperwork confirming vaccinations are up to date for your destination. And depending on what country to go to, that's even more important.
I was going to say an NDSS card. B, do you say to keep your NDSS card? I was thinking that fits in the medical ID sort of section as well, to have your NDSS card if they're asking for proof. Sometimes you get those sorts of questions.
Yeah, in Australia, absolutely. Overseas, I've been told it really doesn't hold much clarity.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't hurt to take it.
Yeah.
We have
airport
90% of people said that they do have glucagon that's intake. So
how cool is that?
They're organized.
Excellent. Good job, guys. And the 10% that don't have it, that doesn't matter that you don't have it, but maybe that's something now that you would like to consider when you're preparing for a trip. So airport tips. These are some of the ones that I think we all worry a little bit about. One of them is keep your travel letter easily accessible. A really good example is just tuck it in your passport. Don't do a Fiona and staple it. It causes a lot of problems. You're allowed a paper clip, but do not staple. It takes many minutes to explain why you have damaged your passport. Arrive at the airport early. Give yourself, if they say 2 hours, get there an extra hour early, just so you can just get through nice and calmly. If they do want to do a few extra security things with you, there's no rush. Don't check in any of your medical supplies. So make sure all your medical supplies come on board with you, but not all in the one bag. Make sure they're split. Ensure you have easy access to your BG meter, insulin, hypo food, and snacks. I believe I'm now trendy. I always say wear a bum bag, because you never know if you're going to get hit by turbulence, and that you won't be allowed to reach up, even if you're having a hypo, if you've got severe turbulence, to get your hypo food. So by having a bum bag with insulin and everything in it, you are prepared. Funnily enough, had that experience where we hit absolute severe turbulence, and I actually didn't know it at the time. I had someone with diabetes behind me who was having a hypo, and they could not get up to their luggage. I actually gave them some of my stuff.
You don't want to wake up someone next to you sleeping either sometimes, to climb over and get your stuff out. So it's handy to have it where you are.
Absolutely. Airport security tips. Insulin pumps and CGM devices, but they must not be removed even when going through airport security. Even if somebody says to you, miss, you have to take that off, give it to me, we'll keep it safe. No, never, ever take off your pump. Part of that is, one, we don't want to get it lost. And the other part to that is that we want to ensure that it's on you at all times and you're not going to dislodge your sight. What can you do as an alternative? You ask for a pat down, okay? And they can actually do that. But you don't want to rip out a CGM, and you definitely don't want to take your insulin pump off. It's actually in the guidelines for the airline transport industry around the world that pumps and CGM can be worn. Remember, always ask for a pat down. And if they say to you, like when I was coming back from Sydney the other week, they said, I'm so very sorry, you will have to take it off. And I said, no, could I please have a pat down, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. I nearly pulled out the DE card, and then I realized they probably don't know what that is. So I just said, could I please have your supervisor? That worked well.
Remember, you've got that information written in your travel letter as well that you can then produce as evidence if they're going to keep arguing. And I know people will have examples of this, because I was chatting to Fee earlier, and we would often take my son's pump off and just hand it over and walk around. He'll go through, and then we'll put it back on, and they check it and drug swab it and all that sort of stuff. But I think, luckily we've had no dramas. And I think, this is, if we're being prepared, this is what we're talking about here is the safest, the best way, the best guidelines to do to make sure that we're preventing any of those hiccups that might happen in the long run. Lots of us will have examples of that when these things didn't happen and it was fine. But I think if we're talking about how to make it reduce the risk as much as possible, then I think this is the baseline to go from. So.
Absolutely. And everyone has choice what they decide to do. Yeah. So I've actually had my insulin pump test positive to explosives. It was very fun in LAX. 10 security right on top of me within minutes. It was absolutely awesome. And what it turned out to be is that I have asthma. I had Ventolin in my pocket. The Ventolin had gone off in my pocket. My pump was in that same pocket. And the chemicals on it are some of the chemicals they test for. That was a very exciting experience. Very exciting. Another example, not diabetes side, but why it's important to have that travel letter, is that we had in my luggage, my husband and I were split up. Our little boy has anaphylaxis. I had one of the EpiPens, and I had in my travel letter that I had the EpiPen for my son. But in actual fact, the security guard called the top security to say, this is very suspicious. She's carrying an EpiPen. It says it in the letter, but she has no child. And the guy came over, then another security guard came over. And then I'm thinking, gee, I can't see them. And said, oh, just see Buzz Lightyear flying around that pole. That's my son. So, just having those letters, the supervisors are brilliant and they know everything. So you just ask for a supervisor. Airport security tips. Metal detectors are safe. Ask for a pat down instead of a body scanner. The 360 scanners are not recommended for insulin pumps. They will try to get you to go through, and so they're safe. And you just say, it's okay. I would just like a pat down, please. If they say no, you say, hey, that's okay. Can I just speak to your security, your supervisor? Insulin pumps and CGM transmitters can be damaged by X-rays in security equipment, especially insulin pumps. So that is really important. The main thing I say to everybody is follow the advice from your manufacturer, such as two of the big names here in Australia, Medtronic and AMSL. They both have information on their websites and leaflets and things like that that talk about security. So follow the directions from your manufacturer. Ask airport security staff to physically check you and your luggage rather than using X-ray equipment. So if for some reason you put your spare insulin pump that you had it in a hand luggage bag, rather than put that through X-ray, ask them to actually go through it with you. So Australian security regulations, we're really lucky we do have these. And these are specific to Australian airline security regulations for people living with diabetes. If you're traveling outside of Australia, it's really important that you look at what these guidelines may be for your specific airline that you are traveling. So in this, from the NDSS Traveling by Air article, and I'll read it because I think it is brilliant, you must carry all diabetes supplies, including testing equipment, insulin and glucagon delivery devices, syringes, pen needles, and insulin pump consumables in the hand luggage of the person who has diabetes and whose person's name appears on the airline ticket. Now, what's important to also know with that, if you're traveling with a young child, you may not want them to have all that equipment. It is just important in the travel letter that it says that my husband will also be carrying this, this, and this, and his name on that travel letter is exactly what is on the airline ticket. In relation to insulin, your name must appear on all insulin or glucagon pharmacy labeled packaging. Now, we were talking before with Mel about, when you're taking lots of insulin, the boxes are really full. You can actually flat pack the boxes. It will still have your name on it. But what a lot of people don't realize is that you can get your pharmacist to individually label each of your pens or a tray of 5 of the pen fills. It is no extra cost, and they label it with the same labeling they use on a package. So that's really, really important. Give them a few weeks notice, and they do an amazing job. Make sure you take several copies of any letters from your doctor, as you need them to get through customs. Put an extra one in your hand luggage, put one in your, your suitcase as well. Give one in, your child's hand luggage as well. More travel letters you've got, the better it is.
I used to have them in like a folder, one of those project folders with all the plastic sleeves, and I had all my stuff in there so I could just show them that. It kind of scared them off, and they think, you know what you're talking about. And so I'm like, okay.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might try that. I look very professional.
Not staple to my passport fee.
Yeah, I don't do that. That's not a good thing.
All right, we want to have time for questions.
All right.
We're nearly through, aren't we?
I've only got 8 to go.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah. Quick.
They're good. International air travels. There are limits on how much liquid you can carry, so it's really important you check before you go. But these limits are not in regards to insulin or if you are carrying on glucose in the liquid form as well. They're exempt from the rule, but it's very, very important that at the security point that you have proof of both your condition, that you need insulin, and make sure everything is labeled. Majority of time you will get through, and probably 80% of people traveling that are online today will say, we've never had an issue, we've never carried letters. But if something happens, that's actually when you really need it. The other thing is, I've had people before say, oh, don't ever take extra insulin fee, just take what I need. I'll always go to the local hospital if I run out or something happens. Absolutely fine. If that's your choice, no drama at all. Me personally, if I had to log up in an American pharmacy and I'd go to a GP, spend $500 to see them and miss out on a day at Disneyland, I'm much happier to take a bit extra stuff. But it's all choice, and that's the important thing.
I think it comes down to fee as well. We're wanting to set ourselves up to succeed, and we talk about that in diabetes wise. We want to make sure that diabetes doesn't get in the way of things, and we don't want it ruining our fun. So the way to prevent that happening is to be as prepared as we possibly can, because then it's got no way to rear up its ugly head and stuff up your holiday, so we can be really cranky at it, because it doesn't have a chance if we have everything that we need.
Absolutely. Look, I remember going to a talk by Sebastian Seville, who, when he summited Mount Everest, he carried 16 glucose meters with him, divided amongst everyone. And when asked, was that a bit excessive? He said, no way. He said, I needed to be assured that I would have one that would work. Traveling internationally, make sure you check specifics with the airline you're traveling with. Make sure you carry prescriptions for all your medications you're taking with you before you go. Check they're readable, because if you do need something when you're overseas, if you have the prescription, the doctor in that country would be able to refer to what you have. And those prescriptions also have your doctor's contact name on them. All air travels, it's a great idea, as Mel said before, about carrying an NDSS registration card to prove you have diabetes. That's really great in Australia, not necessarily overseas though. In Australia, it's seen as an accepted primary proof. Traveling overseas though, it's not. And you're often required to have the travel letter, etc. If you are carrying your NDSS card though, make sure you have photographic proof with you, such as your driver's license. So these are just some handy resources that I think are so super cool, and what I use to put the presentation to. So JDRF Travel Guide, it is absolutely brilliant. The NDSS travel fact sheet, I absolutely love, and they have a checklist with it. The NDSS Traveling by Air article is also awesome. Big plug for the NDS travel booklet with the checklist. And personally, I wrote a blog a few years ago. I think it's pretty cool. And I wrote it with the team from Beta Change. And, I reckon that's worth a read. And if you have a look at the picture, I hope you can all see it at the top. That, would you believe, is 4 weeks supply of insulin pump line changes. Hidden in there also is all the finger pricking equipment, glucose meters, you name it, all in that little lunchbox, as well as the insulin. So what are FEE's top travel tips? Well, always let's start again. Always carry double the amount of all medication and supplies and split into 2 different bags. Even if you're traveling by yourself, I want you to split it into 2 bags as well. I know it's not always trendy, but wear a bum bag if traveling by plane. Works wonders. CGM doesn't require data to work. It uses Bluetooth. So just remember that when you're on the plane, when you're traveling in remote areas, you can still use your CGM. People may not be able to follow you, but they use Bluetooth, so you'll be right to use them. If you want someone to follow you on CGM, or you want to follow someone while you're away, make sure you have and they have data. Make sure you know how to change the time on your pump, because when you arrive in your country, you need to change that time, as well as also how to change the device on your medical equipment. That's a really good thing to know before you go to see your doctor, because they'll be able to, or diabetes educator, because they'll be able to teach you if you don't know how to change these. And take a USB cable on the plane to charge devices. These are my top tips, all of these. Can't go wrong when FEE follows these ones. Wear medical ID, always carry ID and emergency contacts with you. You can use phone apps and built-in features for emergency contacts, which is also really fantastic. They're also on smartwatches as well. Creo bags, personal favorite of mine. I get no commission at all. I get no commission at all, but totally love them. Those of you who don't know, they're gels. You dip them in water initially for 6 minutes. They swell up and they can keep insulin cool for 36 hours plus. And you can just dip them each day for a little bit extra. Once again, you can learn from FEE. Don't dip it for 6 minutes each day, because they get really fat and you can't get your insulin in. Then you got to get a hairdryer to melt the gels down. So just slow and steady. And also Glucology or MedAngel have small sensors that can be connected to an app that can tell you what your temperature of your insulin is, which are great as well. So these are just the references I've used. Really important that we acknowledge people we take it from. And for you guys also to know that today, the information has been gathered from a lot of really cool sites.
And we will send you an email with all those links later, so you don't need to frantically take a screenshot of that one. Sorry, FEE.
No, absolutely. Oh, you want me to go back? So, do you want screenshots or not?
No, I said they don't need to screenshot it. We'll email them the links so they.
And you're going to do the resources as well, Mel?
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. A big thanks to Mel for beautifying my PowerPoint as well. All right, question time.
Okay, so we had some come in during the chat. A couple of people have got questions about the travel letter specifically. Someone said, who has to sign the travel letter? This was Frances. She had security at Sydney argue with her about her letter. It had the letterhead of the endos rooms, but hadn't been signed by the DE, and she had to argue about the fact that a doctor hadn't signed it. So that's the first question.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer that one, Mel?
Yep.
I must admit, I'm very much on the line, like Mel said before. If we have all our dots and our I's dotted, our T's crossed, we can't go wrong. I'm a big one that I don't sign travel letters as a DE, and I know in our team we don't. We get the doctors to sign it, because in certain countries, not necessarily in Australia, but in certain countries, they actually really want and specify that a doctor needs to do it.
So can you get a GP to sign it?
Absolutely, they're a doctor. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the answer is doctor, I guess,
Doctor.
is if we want our baseline.
Yeah, you could use a diabetes educator, but That could be a
where
bit
you
of
go and
push with
depending on
that.
the and that's the thing, there's all these different variables that we can't control. So if we aim for that highest level, I guess, then that's going to minimize some of that.
Mhm. Another good question was, should you get the letter translated into the language of the country you're going to? What if they don't speak English, the people that you're showing it to?
Oh, what a
fabulous
question. Do you know what? It wouldn't hurt if you wanted to, but no, you don't have to, because in these countries that are English speaking, they often have 2, 3, 4 languages. It's mainly only Australia that only has probably one language in English. England, no, they have numerous languages over there. But no, you don't need to. But I always say, if you can, that's fantastic. Tell you a really good top tip is if you are traveling to European countries and places like that, that English may not be the first language, is to actually carry a list of common questions like, where is the local hospital in that language? Where can I get a lemonade from in that language? Where is the closest pharmacy? I've lost my diabetes supplies. Where can I get some from? If you have those in that language, are fantastic. But my little favorite cheat at the moment is the Google interpreter. You can actually type those in and it comes up on your phone beautifully.
Excellent. Oh, Mel's lost a question.
Sorry. So we've had a couple of questions, just getting specific, like some people are still a bit hazy on going through the security scanners. So someone said, can you go through with a pump and a CGM and sensors? Those are
okay.
Yeah.
So that's a really, really big one.
I keep saying medical detectors. Metal detectors. Go Fee. So metal detectors?
Medical detectors, yes, you can walk through. The 360-degree scanner, the preference is that you would get a pat down. Definitely do not take a pump through. The transmitters, it's a little bit, that's where I'd be asking the specific manufacturer about that, because they will have their own guideline for it. But insulin pumps under no condition to go through the 360. And I wouldn't be putting spare insulin pump through the X-ray machine.
And the wands are all okay too, aren't they? The wands,
yes, the wands are fine.
The wands are all okay. So it's that metal detector one is fine. It's the body scanner one, the new one that they're trying to get us all to go through.
If in doubt,
get
them to pat it out.
Yes. And you're going to get random things. I was giving Fee an example just earlier. We went to France, I think a couple of years ago now. And my son is the one with type 1, and we were carrying poppers and juice, and they said we need to open them to see what's in them. And I was like, well, what's the point of that? That's not, then I can't use them. Like, that's not very helpful. And they said, either we open them or we pat you down. And I went, okay, like, fine, go for it. But it's, these weird things that you will get, even if you've got everything there, it's about being aware and, knowing what's right and what you can argue. I think so having information like this is really useful for finding those random situations, which makes no sense at all. But hopefully we can manage them in the moment.
We just had another one. That was a good one that I see comes up a lot. Do you need to disconnect your pump for takeoff and landing?
Look, that's a really good question. It was actually a study that was done from John Hunter in Newcastle a number of years ago now that showed that when you fly, you can get air in your line and can cause a hypo. There's been a bit of half and half with this, and what it was, disconnect and then push some through, then reconnect and all this type of stuff. I would actually recommend you speak to your team about that. That some people maybe, especially on shorter flights, may be more likely to have a hypo due to maybe this phenomena happening. But it definitely hasn't been something that is taken off and is recommended everywhere at the moment. But if you're concerned about it, please speak to your team about that. Does that make sense? And what it used to be, they used to say you take it off and it's when you get up and you're back at altitude, and then you push the air through and all this type of stuff as well. So it's quite detailed and something I'd love you to talk to your healthcare professional about.
Fee, just related to that, about does insulin work the same when you're on the plane? So I think that's along those similar kind of lines that is useful to get more information about.
Yeah, so insulin, it's really interesting, that one about does insulin work the same on the plane? Absolutely. And the main thing why you might find you run high on a plane is actually because you're quite sedentary, especially if you're on your long flight. So that's something when you're talking to your team to talk about, should you use a temporary basal rate if you're on a pump when you're flying, or should you give some more Opticillin when you're flying? Just because you're going to be very sedentary compared to what you normally are.
Someone asked about, do the Frio bags keep insulin cold enough to put the vials back in the fridge when you reach your destination, or do you need to just keep them out of the fridge for the rest of the trip?
No, absolutely. Once you reach your destination, they can go out of the Frio bag and into the fridge. Great question. Thank you.
I'm just looking at some questions too, Mel.
I've got one. Can I bring one?
Yes.
For those traveling to theme parks, example, Dreamworld,
yes.
I've heard a rumor you can get a special pass. Is this true? It is absolutely true. It is the same in America. If you're going to Disneyland or Disney World, it's called a DAS pass. You have to apply for it 30 days in advance. In Australia, I believe you can say you have type 1 diabetes and they will give it to you. In the US for any of those things, and in the UK, at the Disney World properties, you have a meeting virtually. And what you have to say is what would affect you standing in line for so long? And why do you need to have one of these passes? So, for example, if I'm standing in line for 3 hours, my blood sugars are going to go higher. Therefore, I might need to give myself a manual injection. They're not going to want you to do that in a line, so they'll give you a special pass. It doesn't mean you get to necessarily the front of the line, but what it does, you might not have to stand in line and you can do other things. Dreamworld, SeaWorld, all of those places here in Australia offer them as well. And you can give them a call before you go and just ask them about it. Just remembering, you just don't say I need a disability pass because I have type 1 diabetes. Just explain they may ask you why that you need it, and you just have to remember things like the heat effects. Heat affects me, therefore I can go low. Waiting in line, my blood sugars can be elevated, all of those types of things. Oh, my pump might fall out in the line, that I thought I'd have to do a line change. And of course, they don't want you doing a line change in the line.
We found when we went to America, we just went to customer service into Disneyland or Disney World. We didn't do the 30 days because we didn't really know about it. And we went in there and just had a chat. And so it's worthwhile just having a chat and finding out. I always think there's got to be some silver lining to type 1 being in your world. And if it gets you to the front of the line at things, then it's a bonus. My son routinely goes low, waiting in customs lines, waiting in all those lines, always without fail, likes to hypo in those kind of situations. So it's kind of handy. We get to move to the front of the line.
I'm going to give you a top tip on Disney. They have gone to this 30-day.
Oh, they have.
You can do it. Now, this is a top tip, all right, everyone? But please don't be doing it when I'm going in November. The top tip is you can go in, like Mel said, but you'll just be wasting park time. If you do it online, they will offer you 2 rides a day that they will pre-book right through, and then you can add addition. But if you walk into the park on the day, you won't get those.
There you go.
Top tip.
Good tip. Someone has asked, do we have any recommendations of travel insurance companies that work well?
Oh,
anyone in the comments? Is anyone?
Yeah, let's throw that to everyone. Who do they find is really good?
Look, I'm going to say the Donna Meads Barlow, they have their travel, they have a travel agency, and they were great initially because they had specific ones that were type 1 specific. So DBT travel, I think is what it was. I assume they still, I think they still offer that kind of service. So they were really good for that one when we were in that first year of diagnosis where other ones were saying no. They were able to find somewhere for us to use. Since then, we've used ones through private health and stuff like that, ones that have just been able to add on. It's not been a major issue. And I don't, to be honest, remember it being too much more expensive than other kind of.
NIB was reasonable as well. Francis, thank you.
I think it's just about having a look around and seeing which ones are going to suit your needs. And the type 1 community is the best place to ask those questions as well, because everyone will have had an experience.
That's true.
Too much information, sometimes it's
our Facebook groups. Yes, JDRF has some Facebook groups, and that would be a really good place to ask, because there's groups for parents and groups for adults over 25 who live with type 1. So I'll add them to the email that I send everyone.
Yeah.
We did have a question about, this is a bit off the topic of travel, but it's a good question. In the event we used out-of-date glucagon, what would happen?
It's a really good question. Mel, did you want to answer that, or did you want me to?
I'm going to let you, educator, answer that one.
Yeah, look, we always would say to try to have it in date, but if you don't, something is better than nothing at all. Everybody would always see that. So glucagon is actually a hormone. The main issue with glucagon, when it is drawn up, it becomes unstable very quickly. So you would want to use glucagon and have it all drawn up. It won't last. We're talking wouldn't even last a day with its stability, and that's why we can't get glucagon with pumps. That's something they were trying to do. But as far as if that's all you had, then you're not going to hurt anybody using it. But if you were flying overseas, I definitely would ask for a new one.
What about pump supplies, like test strips? Can they travel under, like in the cargo, or should they be with you as well?
This was a big debate Mel and I had.
Well, that was a good question.
Before. So Mel says that,
I would put some in the suitcase, because that's what I've done previously. So
yeah, and Fee would say no.
Spread my love around.
Yeah, Fee would say no.
Yeah.
Fee would say everything goes with you. Absolutely everything.
Okay.
And it's also a little, I'm just trying to find that part about flying and stuff with an insulin pump to show people. And part of that is, if something happens and your luggage gets lost and you've actually you've only got enough with you for a week, and then you get lost luggage, especially for flying for Qantas at the moment, which I'm going to fly, you don't want somebody else having the extra CGM and glucose strip, though I'm sure they'd be very appreciative.
Do you know about, I just saw this question here about some pump companies not offering loan pumps anymore.
That's absolutely true. AMSL now do not offer a loan pump. Medtronic do. It's $50. Ipso, I'm not sure about. I tried to get onto them the other day. The pods, well, you can get spare pods. I don't think they do loan PDMs, but you would be able to purchase another one.
Nikki asked earlier, can you take your filled cartridges, or should you just take the empty ones and insulin labeled?
Can you do that one again?
As in fill your reservoir first, your pump reservoirs, and then.
I don't know.
No,
it didn't make sense to me, but I thought.
I think if we're talking about them having the labels on them, then we need to take the insulin vials that are labeled, rather than pre-filling our cartridges.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes, Nikki said yes, that's what she meant. So
okay, cool.
Thanks, Nikki. Great question.
There's lots of comments here about people still being told to remove their pumps, and people saying that the airport says that it's perfectly fine.
Yes,
I think it's a really difficult thing, and it does create extra stress for all of us in those situations. So I think it's about trying to be as prepared as we can, trying to stay as calm as we can without, having all our emotions roll up at that instance. And that's why being early is good, because then we're not running late and all of that sort of stuff that increases all those stress reactions in us as well. So I think frustrating, drives us nuts. Lots of things about diabetes out there that drive us crazy, that we wish people knew better about. So I think if we can have all of that information with us, then we're armed with as much as we can. Unfortunately, we can't make everybody understand everything as well as we.
And I think the other thing, it comes down to knowing your rights. So actually your rights as a person living with type 1 diabetes is that you can request a pat down, and it's actually in the legislation, okay, the aviation legislation. So yes, you're going to get people that will say, no, you can take it off. And coming back from Sydney the other week from the summit, I got it. And I gave them 3 chances. And then, as I said, I asked for a supervisor. So rather than get all upset about it and all of those things, what I'd actually be just doing is, could I please speak to a supervisor? If you wanted to be super, super prepared, you could actually download the information that they have for security at the airports, and it actually has it very clearly stated there. The other things is Medtronic and AMSL, they both actually have a flyer that you can take that actually tells that their device should not be taken off. The other thing is if you are having a travel letter and that travel letter says not to take the device off, they cannot argue with you. But just remember, know your rights. It's not about starting an argument. People just sometimes don't know. But if you're feeling uncomfortable, just ask for a supervisor. And I would probably say 1 in 3 times I travel, I like to have a chat to a supervisor.
Anyone else have any questions they want to ask about instead of typing? Feel free to jump in. Because I think that's most of is that all of the ones that are in the chat there?
They're the ones in the chat, but the other day we did get some people send us some earlier.
Yep.
This is a complicated-ish one. So she was saying they usually do 6 p.m.-ish insulin at home, which will be around 9 a.m.-ish over there. Should she move it to the daytime dose in keeping with the home time, or should she move it to the UK time so it's the night dose when they're away?
That's a really great question, and that is actually, I'm going to pass it. That's something that you need to discuss with your team, because it's not just about changing the time, it's about making sure that while you're on flight and in transit that you don't miss that opticillin dose. So that's why we recommend carrying like 2 watches or 2 phones with different clocks on it, so you can do it. So you really want to have a really good travel plan written out there. Great question.
And someone else had a question around they're going on a long kind of road trip soon, and she's wondering what the expectations are for the child sitting for long periods in a plane or car compared to normal. Like, what can she expect?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? The best way to think of it, long plane trips and a car trip, is a rainy day on the school holidays where kids all veg out on the couch. What happens to glucose levels on those days where we're just lying around? They go up, don't they? And therefore, we often find that kids and adults in those situations need to have more insulin, and that's no different on a plane. Once again, that's one of those things you chat to your medical team about, because they'll be able to guide you. You know, should you just do more corrections? Should you be increasing your long-acting insulin? Should you run a temporary basal rate? If you're on one of these Fandango's automated insulin delivery systems, they'll do the work for you.
One's just come in saying, normally do your levels go high on flights?
Mm-hmm.
Do mine?
Well, I think
generally
it means general. Do people?
Okay, generally, yes. I believe some people do. Well, I'm happy to tell about mine.
Yeah.
I go terribly low. I have to have a lot less insulin going through customs. I am terrible going through customs, especially if they give me a pat down. I feel like my blood sugar, if it's 7, it goes to 4 within about a minute and a half. Or, you know, the times I wrap up my Diet Coke going to Disneyland on the last day with aluminium foil, I forget about it. Then when it goes through security, they go, "What is this?" And I go, "I don't know. I didn't pack it." And you know, the blood sugar just drops very dramatically. And then I hop on. Then I eat heaps of stuff, and then probably overeat it. And then I sit on the plane, and then I go elevated. So I have more insulin.
Or you have your kids that think it's great that you can get like cans of drink constantly because the flight attendants will keep bringing them things while you're having a nap on the plane or something, and they get to have all full strength Coke and enjoy themselves while you're snoozing and maybe forget to bolus. So there's all sorts of, I mean, I think it's one of those things that it's about being aware and paying attention, and we recognize that things are probably going to be different. So it's about making sure that we check those things and not just making assumptions, I guess, about what's happening. I think I was talking to an educator when we were preparing for Summit, and they were talking about, back to basics sort of stuff. And she was discussing a family where they, the teenager was really high on the plane and they couldn't they just went, "Oh yeah, okay, she's just high. And they were thinking, oh, she'd forgotten to bolus, didn't think, and for some reason just didn't connect between maybe having to check for ketones and that maybe it was a dodgy set or something, or things like that. I think we get in that holiday mode and we forget about some of that basic checking stuff. So I think that's where those plans can be really helpful. And she ended up, with ketones and DKA and really unwell. So I think, it's just something to be more aware of. Oh, snow trips. I just saw the snow trip question.
Just before we do that, I just found the article that was written and published in the Diabetes Care Journal, just about somebody asking about disconnecting your pump for flight. Once again, I highly recommend you speak to your team, but basically what the recommendations were one, the cartridge should only contain 1.5 mils of insulin, disconnect the pump before takeoff. At cruising altitude, take the cartridge out of the pump and remove any air bubbles before reconnecting. After the aeroplane lands, disconnect the pump and prime the line with 2 units, then reconnect the pump. During flight emergencies involving cabin decompression, disconnect the insulin pump. Insulin pump deliver excess insulin as ambient pressure decreases, which may cause hypoglycemia. Once again, it was a small study, but enough for people to talk about it and something to speak with your team about. But there is an article with it.
There was one about skiing. I think ski trips are really interesting. I think there's a lot of extra bits of thinking that go into it about, because sometimes your finger pricker doesn't work. It says it's too cold and it won't read your levels when you're at, when you're up on the mountain and you're needing to check. And so there's also, the ski jackets we have are great, and you can put all sorts of things on all sorts of pockets and make everything warm and neat and inside and hidden, and heaps of pockets for snakes and lollies and all sorts of hypo treatments. If you think about skiing, I feel, it's exercise. So often exercise is going to make our levels go lower. My son hypos fairly regularly when he skis, but just we all have stashes of lollies with us, on us, whoever's with him, and he'll just use those while he's going, and then it's about managing your hypos overnight, I guess, the delayed hypos and things. But our new systems work a bit better with all of that, our closed loop systems. So but yes, definitely, the temperatures are going to impact.
Just remember that insulin is a protein that denatures. So if it freezes, it won't work properly. Yeah. So that's really important to know. Just like you don't leave insulin in a bus or a car, you don't leave it and get it frozen either. A couple of tips with when you're going to the snow, if you have an insulin pump, make sure the tubing is inside, because it's very fine tubing. It can freeze quite quickly and readily, and that's what can cause DKA as well. But also, if you keep your, if you're camping and things like that, keep your blood glucose meter in your sleeping bag. Body temperature keeps all those things nice and warm. So keep insulin not in an outside pocket, but in an internal pocket close to your skin.
Yeah.
Great tips. All right. Well, I think.
Any other questions, anybody?
Yeah.
Or any experiences people want to share their frustrations? Feel free.
There's a good one here. Do you recommend having a data roaming or similar like $5 a day data ad when traveling overseas, or rather buying data SIM locally overseas? Look, that's another really good one to ask the whole forum. We bought ours for that specific country when we're there. But that would be something I'd definitely be asking to the T1 tribe. They'd be able to tell you lots of different answers. Mel, have you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, no, I can't even remember what we did when we went overseas, to be honest. Yeah, but I think that's the, the type 1 community is the best place. They're the experts in all of this sort of practical knowledge and bits and pieces that we've all tried. So I think we should use them to, as much as we can, to get those little bits of tips and extra bits that can make things that little bit easier while we're away. So I don't have, I can't remember what we did. I don't think we were following. I don't think we had technology that let me follow him back then. So
I just read one here, and I really like this one, actually. I had someone in Sydney who insisted on opening the transmitter box to see what was inside, even though I said what it was. Look, I know that I feel for you, but I know that you know what's in it. But also think of these guys on the other side. Every single day, these guys are trying to circumnavigate anything that may harm us and ensure that we can fly safely. So my philosophy as a person living with T1D when I travel is, you know what, if they've got an extra question, they want an extra look, then they can have it, because it is really, really important that they are keeping us safe. And that's why they're doing it. They're not doing it to be mean. Yeah, there's some things we have to say, look, we want to pat down, but if they want to look inside a box, then I think that is absolutely okay to do that. And yeah, that's my personal opinion, living with type 1 opinion.
And, you know, if we think about it, then we're, you know, we often talk about how frustrated we are in terms of people not understanding what the type 1 world is like, you know, then that's in a way that we're actually being able to educate people and giving them some more information. If you think about it that way, we're sharing that information, which is only going to be helpful, hopefully, for people following us.
A great one here. There's a new form of glucagon coming later in the year. Is that a question, or is that someone saying, is it coming? It says here, there is a new nasal form of glucagon coming later in the year. There is nasal glucagon over in other parts of the world. We are waiting for it to be released here in Australia or passed it through the TGA. I'm not saying it hasn't. I have not heard that it's passed the TGA. Someone here might have more information on that. Fiona, you've put it up on here. You may know that it has, when it is coming. From what I know at the moment is, yes, hopefully it is coming, but it hasn't been approved as yet.
And there's the other one there about travel insurance for domestic trips versus international. I want to say I'm terrible, and I'm never, very, very rarely do I ever consider travel insurance for domestic, but I feel like it's probably something we should be doing better, given the climate.
I always do
now where flights are cancelled randomly and all this sorts of stuff. It's never been something that I've done, but it's probably something to consider. International always, without a doubt, wouldn't even think of not having it.
Ellie said it's past TGA and they're just waiting for a distributor in Australia.
Oh, cool.
There you go. Thank you.
There we go. Yep.
Excellent.
Okay. Well, I forgot to say before that 69% of our audience tonight were parents of a child, and 27% were adults, and then the rest were other.
Excellent.
Yeah. So that was great.
So we, like I said at the beginning, we run these throughout the year. So far, most of them have been parents, and with parent focused, I guess, for kids. But we're going to run some more adult ones as well in the future. So just keep an eye out. We'll send out the information and we'll be promoting them as we go. We'll send out a survey after today as well, I think. The next teens one starts next week.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just responding to the question that I just saw pop up. So next Thursday, I'll have the 3 sessions. We're doing them 3 weeks in a row, so that will start next Thursday night.
That's the web address I've just put in the comments. If you just go to the events page on JDRF, you can see all our, at the moment, there's a teens, parents of teens course coming up. And then after that, we've got parents of younger children coming up. And then we'll be scheduling another one of these Let's Talk sessions, I guess, soon.
Guys, can I just say, I just read another one here that somebody was told to go through, they were reassured about going through the new super duper X-ray machines, and their pump died 2 days later. AMSL were fabulous, but it took them 5 days to get it. So it is real. And, you know, you just don't want to be one of those people. And I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Come on.
Yeah, look, I think we did it accidentally, actually. I think we were a bit bamboozled on one of our trips, and we were going through many different airports. We did a longer European trip, and I actually think we ended up going through the body scanner and not even realizing, luckily everything was okay. But it was kind of, you get in that situation and you don't really know what to do when they're telling you, no, this one's fine, you don't go through that one, this one's fine. And we're like, oh, okay. You know, or I was telling an example earlier is that we went to Fiji, I think, and my son was quite little. He would have been, I don't know, 5 or 6 maybe. And we did the thing, and I said, all right, he needs to have a pat down. I think we took his pump off because that's what I used to do. So I took it around, and I was sort of then going through security. They were putting me through. And by the time I looked around, they'd taken him off into a little room all by himself for a pat down with no adults, without anybody with him. He happily went. And I was just kind of thinking, oh my God, luckily everything was fine. But, you know, those things happen. And when you're going through security, there's all this extra anxiety and stress, and, you know, stuff happens that you don't really notice and can happen really quickly. So again, prepared as much as we can, have all of that knowledge, then the likelihood of those things is less. I guess we're reducing risk and setting up to succeed.
Look, another one just very quickly. Somebody said our endo said CGM is safe to go through X-ray. Look, I'm a really big one with all of these things. Check with the manufacturer. If the manufacturer says it's safe, then it's safe. If they say don't, then don't.
But once what X-ray we're talking about, I think I think we use the terminologies for all sorts of things. You know, if you think of the metal detector, that walk-through one, they're okay to go through there. Do we want them going through the X-ray, you know, the X-ray machine where you put your bag on and they scan those? Then I think that's where it's not recommended to go through. But it's
somebody even handed over a spare pump and they lost it. Jeepers.
See, I'm like, I think that's why I lost my son, because I was watching the pump go around and watching him, who got taken off into a room. I was busy watching the pump. So never again will it come off.
Jen, this is another good one. Is there a letter to give them to request a pat down? Do you know what? Just get your we could add it.
Maybe add it in that letter.
Add it to a travel letter. Great idea. Well done.
I think that letter can have as much information as possible, and you have them really handy. You have that we're there with you, and you start with it. You can say, look here, I got this letter. This is our situation. Often they'll go, yeah, okay, off you go. You know, but if they don't, then it's everything there. You're not having to then search through things and find stuff and open stuff. So I think having it there and ready to go just reduces some of that stress for you as well. It's like you get all ready for something and then it becomes not an issue, or the work before. But that's, I guess, what we want when we're there. We don't want the issue to happen.
Now, the other thing is here, it's got Emirates don't allow an extra travel bag for medical supplies. Nobody will actually say you can definitely have an extra travel bag. So when you're talking to them, and if for some reason that you had a little bit extra, that's when you say, this is my life-saving equipment, and that's how you get through. But it doesn't say on any of the airlines, and they won't say that you can have an extra bag for medical equipment, because you could imagine everybody is going to have a medical
Everybody will say it's medical equipment. Well, thank you everybody for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See you later. Take care.